Today we're going to take this old rusty fuel tank and turn it into an awesome outdoor kitchen. It's been sitting out here in the woods for probably 40 years, and the fuel in it, man, it's just something else. But you know what? One man's junk is another man's treasure. And with a beautiful spring day and a little bit of imagination, well, it's going to be cool. Stay tuned. About this time last year, my wife Brooke and I bought this piece of property. It has an abandoned off-grid cabin on it. Not only did we get the property and the cabin, but there's been some interesting finds on this place. One of the things that we found on the property is this old fuel tank. Now, this thing's been sitting here for decades. And the fuel that's in it, I don't even know what it is anymore. It's so old. I don't think it's diesel. I don't think it's gasoline either. I think it's kerosene, but it's from the 80s, so who knows what it is.
Fuel still burns.
Well, the one saving grace is there's not a lot of fuel in this tank, just a couple gallons. I'm going to drain it out and see what we got.
Good, hardly anything.
About 3 inches in the bottom of this thing. 3 or 4 gallons, I'm guessing.
Now, a couple days each year, our county has a hazardous cleanup at the recycling center. So that's where this stuff is going. No matter what it is, it's definitely not something I want to have hanging around here.
There's still a couple gallons left in there.
Man, I hope I get this thing emptied before I run out of jugs. Well, about halfway through my last jug, I finally finished running out the very last of the fuel. Now it's time to move on. Now, even though the tank is technically empty, there's still maybe just a bit of residual fuel in there that I couldn't get out of the tank. And I'm going to need to get this thing completely cleaned out before I take an angle grinder to it. Because the last thing I want to do is start cutting on a fuel tank that's full of vapors. Not a good idea. Now, I gotta admit, I was pretty interested to see what would happen putting this fuel tank on the fire. Not only was there fuel in there, but there was a big puff of white smoke, so I assumed there was a bit of water in there too. Now, I doubt there could be more than a cup or two of fuel left in this tank, but when you boil it and vaporize it, it's amazing how much fire is coming out of this thing. Now, I had assumed something interesting would happen putting this tank on the fire, but this is even better than I hoped for. About the time you think it has to be done, it just keeps going and going. Once it was pretty much completely done burning out, I took the tank and moved it around, let the top burn out, tipped it up on its end, basically tried to heat every side of the tank. I just want to make sure that when I go to cut into this tank, there's nothing left in it that's going to go woof. It's amazing, even after burning this thing for half an hour, it still has a little bit of something in it. Well, I think it's about good. We're going to let her cool off for just a second, then we're going to start doing our modifications. Now, the original fill tube, where you'd actually put the fuel in this tank, is a 2-inch pipe. It just so happens I have a chunk of 2-inch pipe with a coupler right here. So I'm going to screw this on as a chimney. Now, a 2-inch chimney is not much of a chimney, and it might not draft worth beans, but it'll at least give us a chance to try it out. I probably will put a 6-inch chimney on this stove, because then it would burn nice and clean. It would draft really well. But for now, you work with what you got, and this is what we have. So we're going to give this a try. Now the plan here is simple. I'm going to cut a stove door in the end of it. This is just going to basically look like a big wood stove. But I do love the height. Like for working height, if you're going to cook off the top of this thing, it's a nice tall cooking surface. Now we're just going to eyeball in a door. That looks about right. Yeah, but like that. Something like that. Now cutting out this door, I'm going to do 99% of the cutting, but I'm not going to cut the door free. I want that plate to stay in its spot where it is right now until I drill the holes for the hinges. That looks about right. Now the idea for the door is basically like every stove that's ever been made. 2 hinges and then some kind of a latch. I don't know that I'm going to put a draft on this stove. I can just crack the door open and that'll be enough of a draft. I don't think it needs to get that fancy. Now the chunk of bar here that I used for a ruler to mark out the door, that's what I'm going to use for the latch. Just a very simple basic latch. Well, now that I've got everything lined up and I know where everything's going to go, I'm going to finish cutting out this door. Now I just have to trim up the very corners and it'll pop right out of there. Just like that, she's out. Now we'll bolt on the hinges, bolt on the door latch. Everything should be about as good as it needs to be. Let's put it that way. Oh yeah, that looks about right. Yeah. Now we'll finish up this latch. I need to put a catch for the latch. About like that. Eh, not quite. Maybe a little modification. A little bit of very precise technical modification. Perfect. Oh, amazingly, even though this thing's totally burned out, there is still a touch of fuel down there in the corner. Ironically, the inside of the fuel tank looked really good. It's too bad I don't need a fuel tank. I don't have any use for it. But a cool little outdoor stove like this, well, that's a little more interesting to me. Now, I have to admit, I don't have high hopes for this chimney. 2 inches is a very small chimney for a stove this size. We'll see what happens. Well, so far so good. But I think the stove would burn a lot better with a 4-inch chimney at the very least, if not a 6. But how does it cook? Now that's really the question. Let's get some food on this thing. So the menu for today is bratwursts, eggs, and coffee. Sound good? And you can see with the door open, the smoke wants to go out the door just as well as it wants to go up the chimney. so I'll definitely have to put a bigger chimney on it. But hey, it's doing all right for what it's intended to do. Now I gotta say, this big cooktop, it's got a lot of room. You could cook a lot of food on this. I plan on having some of my buddies out for a breakfast one of these Saturdays. And this stove is going to be really nice. We can all cook a great big feed on here, sit around a campfire, and just have a good time. Oh, our bratwursts are doing nice. They're about done. Time to put some eggs on. Water's getting about ready for some coffee too. Oh, the brats are all done, so I'll put them in the warming pan. Then I've got the big non-stick to put the eggs in. Lovely. I think we'll do 3 eggs. You know, I can't think of anything better to do on a nice day like this than to cook a nice big breakfast on on a redneck fuel tank stove. I like that 3-egg flip. What's more satisfying than taking something that has no value to you and turning it into something that's enjoyable, something that's useful? 2 hours ago, this was a rusty old fuel tank full of 40-year-old kerosene. And now? Well, now it's kind of a special little addition to the property.
And just like that, one man's funky old disgusting junk is another man's cool, new outdoor kitchen. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. My name's Dave Whipple, and you've been watching Bush Radical. And be radical, eh? See you soon.